Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here on my next Boruto Anime episode review. This one's going to be for episode 44, which is called Shikadai's Doubts. And yeah, I thought this was another very good episode of Boruto. I really liked that they're still continuing with presenting the issues around the Byakuya gang as being very complicated, that they are gaining support from some people who appreciate that they are noble thieves, but they're also still presenting the other side of it, where they are still thieves and they are still just stealing from people. And I suppose this episode was primarily there to, for the most part, give us Shikadai and Boruto's view on these situations, of saying that Boruto, after, I suppose, directly seeing and experiencing the kind of, I suppose, dislike from people trying to, I suppose, stop the Byakuya gang, has kind of, at this point, committed to being like, no, I disagree with the way they're doing this, and I think they need to be stopped, and us find a better way to kind of help people. Whereas Shikadai, who very much is being presented in a main character-like role here, is more on the line of that we... it's a complicated one, because I think he gets the point that Boruto and all the others are trying to say, but he kind of leans to more accepting it as a necessary evil, that it's something that sort of maybe we have to accept given the situation that we're in, and even then, like us as kids, we can't do anything to do this. The power and the need to make any change is all in the hands of the adults. So they've pointed out a couple of times now kind of how mature he is. And especially with Tamari later on in the episode, kind of pointing out that, like, usually your kind of the discretion on these type of things is good, but why did you hesitate here? And so I'm very interested to see where they go with this character arc, because will they have him be always presented as the very, very sympathetic character to, you know, noble thieves, or will they... I think of just in general how they tackle this issue. Are they going to commit to having them go full on villain, so like our characters feel justified in taking them out? Or are they going to continue with the kind of subtlety of, like, you know, we kind of have to let them operate but just kind of police them a little bit? Or will the Leaf Village find a way to actually help them out in some way? I'm leaning towards them probably having some kind of solution come the end of this, because Boruto brings up the idea of, like, that potentially some of this is Naruto's fault because he hasn't come up with any solution to tackle this, and as the leader of the village he's expected to do that. But then equally Hinata is kind of presenting the idea of, like, these type of things, it's kind of very difficult to just come up with an immediate solution, that it takes time for these things to progress, in that obviously I think they're leaning in the direction of kind of saying, like, this town, okay, the Byakuya gang stole money to repair their water supply, but if their water supply breaks down again, is it just going to be an expected thing that they have to be stole from again? Or does a bigger change need to be made with regards to maybe improving the technology around their water supply so it won't break down, or potentially even moving that village to a place that has a better access to a water supply? In that I could almost see it where, like, it's just some kind of plan that maybe no one's told anyone about, and then they'll suddenly reveal that, yeah, we were always planning to help this town out, we just needed to get it all kind of together so we could actually reveal it. It's definitely a very complex issue, and especially with, I suppose, what they're going for with the idea of, like, Shikadai and Ryogi's relationship of, clearly the two, I think by the end of this episode, are very much close to, I think, realizing that, you know, I think Shikadai more or less realizes that Ryogi's part of this, and then Ryogi is very much leaning towards, I suppose, like, helping Shikadai to figure out the truth about this whole situation. And I think the next episode, the preview for the next episode, seems to suggest that this will be where the reveal comes out, where they both figure it out, and we'll see what Shikadai's reaction is to this whole thing and how they attempt to tackle it going forward. Because the other thing going on here is that they seem to be presenting the leader of the Byakuya gang, Ryogi's kind of father to a degree, as actually being a kind of more villainous character. At least in some of the looks that he's giving, maybe not the actions, and that he is just leading this gang that people seem to support, but it feels like we're almost setting up that he's going to make a decision for the gang where even some members of the gang can't quite agree with, or I think that Ryogi can't agree with. Maybe because, to some degree, of the influence of Shikadai. I think that's probably the way they're going to kind of lean towards doing this, that his interactions with Shikadai will show him enough that the Leaf Village doesn't need to be like destroyed or taken down completely, because there are good people living here, and that some of the things, like I suppose potentially some of Katasuke's research, will actually fundamentally be a bigger step towards helping these kind of poorer villages, and it's a benefit to keep them kind of active and not steal from them while they're still working, and maybe something can be kind of progressed from there. As I said, it seems like it's a very complex issue. Obviously, I think when it comes down to it, they'll probably have a simpler solution than maybe we expect them to have. But right now, there's so many moving parts at play in this story that it's difficult to come out with just, I think, a really, really solid conclusion. Like, I think we're going to get fight scenes, and we're going to see, I suppose, a big fight scene involving, you know, some of our characters, and I suppose the leader of the Byakuya gang, and I think we'll get Ryogi being involved in this as well, in that it feels like him, kind of like Kagura from like one of the previous arcs, they're going to do something a bit more substantial with him as a character, in that I feel that he's almost being set up as a character who kind of could return at a later point, depending on what they do with him. Because like he's more or less, I think, given Boruto and Shikadai all of the kind of the hints that they need to figure out that he's part of this, and he's kind of, I think he wants to see what their reaction is to him, and given what they've set up, it almost seems to place Shikadai and Boruto at odds with each other about how exactly to tackle this, and that Boruto seemingly wants to just stop them now, and Shikadai is being a little bit more supportive of them. Hence why when Tamari kind of asked them all to help her, he kind of hesitated instead of helping. So he seems like he's figured it out already, whereas Boruto is very willing to jump into action. Which, just on that point, I suppose, Tamari, it was really cool to see her kind of jump into action, that, you know, maybe you had some slight worries about, like, oh, she's just been presented as, like, making dinner at home. Is that all that's going on here? But then just, I think her explanation of, like, because of the seriousness of this situation, anyone who is tuning class or higher is expected to be involved in this, so she's on a mission. So I thought that was good, that she still does active missions, but also, you know, does some of the work at home. So it was cool to see that, and then just demonstrate how powerful she is, and that she more or less gets most of the Byakuya gang fleeing from her, which I think is the overall, I suppose, takeaway from this, in that when it comes down to a fight, there's really no challenge here unless a very specific group of Leaf Village characters has to fight the Byakuya gang. In that if any Jonin character gets involved in this fight, it feels like it kind of is just immediately over, outside of any like kidnapping, threatening stuff going on here. If it's just a straight up fight, any of I think our notable characters should be able to easily defeat the Byakuya gang, even if they have an ice style user. But the problem will be, of course, if it's mainly our Genin characters against them. I think that could be a more even fight. So it's going to be very interesting to see who they decide to involve in the fight, because this is, I suppose, the problem with the likes of, say, Naruto and Sasuke, but even a lot of the other characters as well, of like, you can't involve them in these kind of minor plots, because that immediately has to end any fight that we have. So that's where like you're like, Konohamaru, will they keep Tamari in play, or will we see Shikamaru? There's a lot of characters that we have going on here, in that we saw like Udon here as like he's confirmed to be the leader of the Metal Lee, Denki, and Iwabe kind of team, which was cool to see him again. And then I'm just like, wait, that's Udon. That's that guy with the kind of dripping nose. That's pretty cool. I hope we maybe get to see him in action, just to see what his kind of jutsu speciality is. As for that moment at the start of the episode, I'm not really sure what to make of it, because it felt like they were almost setting up at the very start of the episode that like Iwabe is going to be like a very important part of the episode. But I think it was more of just they're using Iwabe as a way to kind of highlight the need for the Genin to not jump into action, because the Byakuya gang are going to be a challenge for any Genin. I think they did emphasize that quite well, that any Genin team that spotted the Byakuya gang sort of had to stay on the back foot, in that they would be at risk, whereas it'd be an okay fight for a Jonin or even a Chunin, but the Genin, it is a kind of stretch too far. And I think we saw that when Iwabe jumped into action. Denki kind of got himself into a bad situation, and Metal Lee had to kind of get him out of it, but got injured in the process. And they blamed it on Iwabe's kind of arrogance, because he had this kind of really confidence-boosting kind of maneuver when he was helping out the construction workers, and seemingly kind of captured the whole Byakuya gang with his Earth style, but then they just burst through it. So he kind of just highlight that, like, without Ryogi as their Ice style user, the Byakuya gang, I think, might be taken down relatively easily. But Iwabe, I think, continues to be very, very impressive with his jutsu, just that already he seems like one of the most powerful Earth style users we've seen. We know he's a little bit older than the rest of like his peers, but he seems very advanced at certain jutsu at the very least. Not really sure where they're going as such with Iwabe. If they're going to lean into any sort of a character arc based on this, in that like Metal Lee is kind of injured temporarily. Maybe it's just to take some of the Genin out of the action, or just to create the plot point of like, one of their group has got injured. This is a bit more serious than we maybe expected it. This isn't just a gang of robbers. They're actually serious and people could get hurt. So I thought that throughout the episode that was actually quite well done, of just highlighting that a single group of Genin realistically can't take down the Byakuya gang. The only one you'd maybe expect to hold up would be Mitsuki, Boruto, and Sarada, but even them, maybe this would be a stretch too far for them. So there is a need to have some sort of a Jonin level character involved here, especially when someone has a KK Genkai like Ice style. So very interesting episode, very thought-provoking. I think there's a lot of discussion to be had around how exactly to solve the sort of kind of socio-political issues they're kind of exploring here. I hope they do it well. I'd be a little disappointed if they just have this really simple basic solution where the villain, the leader of the Byakuya gang, just makes a kind of, I suppose, truly like indefensible villainous decision that just turns everyone against them and gives like justification to take them down. I think you need to keep the complexity around like, wait, should we do this or not? Because that's, I think, where a lot of the intrigue kind of comes from, of like, this is a complicated issue that no one really knows how to tackle. The fact that younger characters like Himawari are bringing up that, like, I heard on the TV that the Byakuya gang are good, and if not for Boruto kind of pointing at the reverse of what the TV is presenting, that no, they're robbing from people. There's always a better way to help. But Hinata, I suppose, presenting the more even-handed approach of like, yes and yes, but at a base level, these issues, like, they just can't be solved that easily. There's always complexities involved in these type of things. So how they explore that's going to be the key thing. So yeah, I think that's, for the most part, my thoughts on this episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on it as well. How do you think they're going to resolve the more kind of complex issues at play here? Where do you think they're going with kind of Shikadai as a character? And so on. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.